Hey friend, in today's watercolor tutorial, I'm going to be teaching how to paint a fall landscape of Lake Clark National Park in Alaska. Without further ado, let's get painting. For today's tutorial, I'll be using Viridian Green, Aqua Green, Payne's Gray, Black, Perylene Green, Sap Green, Burnt Umber, Orange, and Yellow. I'll also be using a little bit of white gouache for some details with our mountain. The paper I've taped down here is a size 5 by 7 inches, and I'll be using a Princeton round brush in sizes 2, 6, and 16. To get started, I want to begin with our sky, and I'm just going to use just the smallest amount of Payne's Gray to kind of mark our mountain, and I'm using a very watered down light version of Payne's Gray. And I'm just going to do a rounded curve towards the left and some towards the right, just kind of mirroring that curve. And then from this point, I'm just going to take some water, and all along this sketch line, I am going to just place some water up above, and the sketch line will kind of dissipate into the water. From there, I'm just going to take more water with my size 16 brush and wet the area all the way to the edges of the tape. And then just take a little bit of Payne's Gray and apply some, allowing some white to pop through as a cloud. From here, I'm just going to add a couple more deeper, vibrant touches of the Payne's Gray off towards the right. And then some towards the left area as well. And a little bit in the center, just to give a little bit of variety here. Okay, so now I'm just going to take my brush and just kind of smooth out the sketch line where the water line is. I'm actually going to switch to my size 6 brush. It's a little bit easier to do with the smaller brush for this step. And I'm just going to smooth out some of the sketch line here in this lighter area. Okay, so from now, we are going to start our water down below, which Lake Clark National Park has a gorgeous lake below this mountain. I'm going to use my Aqua Green to do a sketch line just about, I want to say almost 2 inches from the bottom. And once I have that sketch laid out, I'm just going to take my size 16 brush and all the way to the top border of this sketch line to the edges of the tape. I'm just going to do a nice wash of water. And I'm going to add just a touch of some Viridian Green. Then from here, I'm going to layer on some Aqua Green this time. Aqua Green is just such a beautiful color. It's so vibrant. And just in a few areas, I'll have some more concentrated aqua green. And then I also want to reintroduce just a touch more of the Viridian Green, just for some vibrancy of the green hues to kind of pop through. Okay, we can come back to this after it's dry just to add a little bit of texture. But for now, I'm going to mark off some of our ground that we're going to have here using just a little bit of burnt umber. And I'm just going to give about, whoa, I just had like a nice big drop of water come in here. So I'm just going to like redistribute that water that dropped off of my brush. Otherwise it would form kind of an interesting watermark, which is okay, not a big deal. And then I'll kind of re-add in some aqua green because I think I lifted quite a bit with that size 6 brush. What I love about watercolors, you can always reintroduce some color as things are still wet. It's very forgiving. Okay, so from here, I'm going to resume that next step just by doing kind of a loose, rough sketch line using burnt umber. And the sketch is about 1/2 inch above the border of our water. Then from here, I am going to do a really watery, loose kind of mountain that's like below the snow-capped peak. So to do that, I am going to start by lightly sketching with a size 6 brush a mountain using my Payne's gray. And I'm going to make the mountain slightly jagged. It's going to slope up high towards the right, but we've got a little peak here towards the left, a little bit of jagged texture in the center here, and then it just elongates over to the right. Then from here, I'm going to take some water using my size 16 brush, and I'm going to rinse that off a little bit more thoroughly. I don't want Viridian Green in there. But I'm just gonna take that water and just move it across like so, all the way up to the tip top of the sketch line. Then from here, I'm going to take some Payne's gray, and I just want to paint in some Payne's gray right at the top border, allowing it to bleed out below. And then I'm going to take a little bit more water and just help it kind of bleed down. And while it's still wet, I want to add a little bit of texture and variegation in color. So I'm going to take my size 6 brush and tap it into some burnt umber. And I'm just gonna add a couple just pops of this golden burnt umber, just to give a little bit of fall color to this mountain that's really deep, deeply saturated and dark with shadows. I just want a little bit of texture in here with a little bit more golden hue. And then I'm just gonna take my brush with a little bit of water and just help blend some of that Payne's gray to mesh a little bit more with the burnt umber. Next, I'm just going to take some water to help smooth out the transition of this mountain down below. Alrighty. And then I am just going to allow this to kind of set a little bit more. And once it's fully dry, we can come back to the next step. For our second little mountain layer, I'm going to do some Perylene Green with a little bit of Payne's Gray and a touch of burnt umber. So I'm going to take a little bit of watered down Perylene Green to start, and I am just going to do another really loose sketch of just an irregular mountain ridge. And then once I have that, I'm going to take my size 16 brush and just do a plain wash of water all along the border below the sketch, and then just paint the water all the way down. And I'm just going to take a very subtle amount of the Perylene Green so I'm just using a light amount to begin. And then I'm just going to take a little bit of Payne's Gray to kind of mesh with some of the Perylene Green. Just give it a little bit more of a cooler tone. And then I'm just going to take my size 6 brush real quick and just give some irregular jaggedness to this mountain ridge. Just a little bit more texture. And then from there, I'm going to take some burnt umber and just layer in a little touch of this golden umber. And then I'm going to take a little bit of water and just kind of drag out, using my size 16 brush, some of this pigment. I'm just reintroducing a little bit more color with the burnt umber and Perylene Green. Now my page is just slowly starting to dry, and at this point I can start to add some fall trees. I'm going to start with lighter colors first, so I'm going to add in some bright yellow, and I'm just going to add in a touch of yellow, and I'm just going to allow it to kind of bleed and softly have some wet and wet technique. And we will layer some other colors as well, including our orange and our burnt umber. I'm going to start adding some orange in this gap. Maybe a pop of orange up high, just kind of an orange tree tucked in these yellow tree areas. Add a little bit of layering of orange down below this yellow. And then I do want to add some burnt umber just to tone down some of the color a little bit. So I'm going to add in just a touch of burnt umber to kind of layer on some of the yellow in the orange as well, just a little bit. So I'm not going too overboard with the burnt umber. Kind of tucking some in above some of the foliage that's lighter in color. This is just going to make the foliage look a little bit less flat. And then from here, I'm going to take some more burnt umber, and I'm just going to do a little bit of irregular brushwork all along this waterline. So I'm just kind of taking my brush and just doing some loose texture. Then from here, I'm going to take just a hint of yellow and then mix it with some burnt umber to kind of make a yellow ochre, and I'm just going to paint that all the way across. And while that's still drying, I'm going to grab just a little bit of Sap Green, a nice bright green, and I do want to add just a couple touches of some green foliage in here because not all the trees turn. So I just want a little bit of a pop of green texture, kind of in a cone shape to kind of mimic a pine tree. And I'm having the edges be nice and loose and variegated since some of the fall foliage is kind of amongst layered and amongst the pine trees. So our pine trees are not going to be in full view, but just kind of popping just above. So making sure those edges are nice and loose. And do maybe a second one off towards the left here. And then maybe one over here as well. Maybe it's just popping above the mountain layer. Okay, then from here, I'm just gonna add in using a blend of Sap Green and a touch of Perylene Green. I'm just gonna use really light pressure with my brush just to add a couple of pine trees that are in the front. I'm using a little bit of Perylene Green just so that way the green is more of a hunter green and it can pop amongst the other colors that we've already laid out. And if needed, you can totally switch gears to your size 2 brush, or you could just use really light pressure with your size 6 brush to make these little dainty pine trees. And again, I'm just mimicking kind of a cone shape and just adding some loose brushwork on either side. I just want to sprinkle in a few of these pine trees, so I'm not going too crazy. I'll probably add 1 or 2 more. And then I'll just do one that's like partially in view, but slightly cut off towards the right. Next, I'm going to take my size 2 brush with some burnt umber and add a few branches and trunks to our fall trees. So I'm going to start over towards the left here with a subtle trunk, just a vertical line. And then with that, I'm just going to add a few dainty, delicate dash lines just as some branches. They're all at different odd angles, but this is just going to help connect some of the foliage. Just added a little trunk here and then a couple little branches stemming off of that. We'll do a little trunk here as well, and then a second little branch, maybe one off towards the left. Here you can just get creative with these dainty, delicate dash marks, but With these branches, our foliage will start to kind of come alive a little bit. I'll add a little trunk here and then a couple little branches as well in that short little shrub. This tree, I have quite a few more branches. I'm basically just doing these angled connected lines, but I like to say that branches are almost like Y letter shapes, just at different odd angles. I'm going to add a couple branches in this tree that's off in the distance here as well. I'll do just a couple in this faint yellow tree. Okay, so now we have some more branches kind of incorporated in there. Next, I'm going to take my size 6 brush and just take some plain water, and I just want to soften the transition between the aqua blue and the brown kind of fall colored ground just above. So I'm just taking my brush with some pressure to kind of soften the harshness of this transition line. So just plain water and a good amount of pressure will help kind of achieve that. You can rinse your brush off when needed just to kind of get a cleaner color. Then from here, I'm going to take some Van Dyke Brown, and I'm just going to add in just a few touches of the Van Dyke Brown in this transition area while it's still slightly wet. That's totally fine. And I'm just tapping my size 6 brush just like so. Just to give it some more texture, I'm going to move slightly higher up at some points. And then I'm going to take some plain water just to help soften that transition just a little bit. And then I'm going to take my size 2 brush and add in a little bit more texture with the burnt umber. Kind of want to get some dainty, like grass-like texture. So I'm just going to take my size 2 brush and add in just a few areas of the burnt umber. Okay, so now I'm just gonna water down some burnt umber and add just a bit of it amongst our trees. So especially the orange trees, I'm just gonna tap in irregularly some burnt umber, and that way it can just have a little bit more shading involved. Before I do anything else, I just want to reshade using some burnt umber and just the tip of my size 2 brush. I just want to add a little bit more depth to this outline transition of the water and the kind of meadow just above there. So I'm just kind of tapping in some dark burnt umber. And now I'm gonna take my size 6 brush and add in a blend of Aqua Green with a touch of Payne's Gray. And with this, I just wanna add a few irregular horizontal streaks using the tip of my size 6 brush. And I just want some slightly angled and some just horizontal brush strokes just to give some movement to our water. Okay, I love how that just made the water pop. Next up, we're gonna start our mountain. And with our mountain, we may use some gouache here and there possibly, but for right now, I just wanna start manually adding in some texture. So I'm gonna use some black. And for the black, I want it to be slightly watered down to begin with, and I'm going to start just by giving a little bit of subtle texture with my size 6 brush, and I just want some really loose brushwork here. The mountain has some kind of jagged mountain, like just depths of the mountain popping through the white snow. So to achieve that, I need to add in some black using the white negative space of the page to be kind of our natural highlight. So here I just added a few touches of this watered down black, and now I'm just gonna soften it just a little bit with some water and some pressure with my brush. Next up, we're gonna have kind of a slope here. I'm just gonna take my brush and just do some dry brushing meaning I'm just going to take the belly of my brush and drag it downward in this similar motion, kind of pointed angled towards the left slightly. Then from here, I'm just going to take some water to kind of smooth out and blend the top slightly. And then I'm just going to drag down a little bit of the pigment left on my brush to kind of touch the border of the mountain below. From here, I definitely want some more jagged or darker areas of the mountain of the rock popping through. So I'm going to do some slightly darker concentrated black. I'm going to start with just this little kind of rough texture here. Over here, I'm going to have a couple other areas of popping black coming through. From here, I want another kind of almost like a C curve shape with a few more areas kind of blotting downward. So I'm just lightly tapping my brush. I also want to add a touch of some darker elements in this other kind of slightly gray area that we did before. Now towards the right, I want to come back to our gray wash. And I just want to do similar to what we did here. I'm just going to add in some gray, allowing some white to pop through as well. Then from here, I'm just going to take my wet brush and just kind of buff out some of that gray. Allowing some flecks of white to just kind of pop through. And then whatever gray is left on my brush, I'm going to give a little bit of shadow to our peak. So I'm just going to do an angled brush stroke towards the left here. And then I'm lightly outlining the outmost ridge on the left far side of the mountain. And then just kind of subtly shading this curve here. Then I want to add some darker black elements. I'm going to start by doing kind of a angled line, kind of sloping downward, and I'll do a smaller one just below it. If you notice, I'm keeping all of these mountain details very loose and jagged and irregular. I'm going to add another sloping kind of brush stroke here with irregular touches to it. And then I'm going to do a couple more that are slightly chunkier right in here. And I'm going to add just a couple touches on this outmost edge. And then just a couple little flecks of the black scattered up high towards the right. And then just a little bit on the inside of this area as well. Over towards the left here, I do want to add a few pops of the darker black. So I'm just going to take my brush, get a little bit more black on there, and just add just a few touches of this. Then I'm going to add a little bit of a few touches of gray. And there we have our mountain. For one last finishing touch, I'm going to take some burnt umber and I'm going to paint some pine branches or tree branches kind of angled in towards the center of the painting. I'm just starting with a jagged line and adding a few branches and dash marks stemming off of it. Maybe this branch is cut off in the continuation of the page. And I'll just do a third smaller one just down below. And then from here, I'm just gonna take my size 6 brush and mix some Sap Green with some Perylene Green just to tone it down a bit. And here, I'm just gonna tap my size 6 brush really loosely, using mainly the tip of my brush just to get these irregular brush strokes. I'm just gonna add this kind of loose, wet, watery foliage all along these branches. Then from here, I'm just gonna take my size 2 brush using the same color that we mixed, and I'm just gonna add almost like pine needle texture. So just really loose, dainty, kind of wispy brush strokes, just extending from the wet paint. And as needed, you can always get some more paint from our mixed color. This is just to get kind of that pine texture. And it's okay to have some of the branch kind of pop through as well and come through amongst all the foliage. And I'll just do one final little branch, just a small one, kind of underneath it all, that maybe doesn't have any foliage on it. Well, it looks like we ended up not really needing our white gouache after all, but I will say if any of your gray areas or texturizing overpowered some of the white natural highlights from the negative space of the watercolor paper, you can always use white gouache to kind of texturize back in some highlights if necessary. So it's always nice to have this handy. Thank you so much for joining me for today's Lake Clark National Park tutorial from Alaska. I hope that you enjoyed this one, and be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any further watercolor tutorials.